Welcome, everyone. Simon Rosenberg, Hopium Chronicles, back with another exciting, interesting, compelling event. Joining me today is my dear friend, Rob Shapiro. Rob, welcome.
Pleasure to be here, Simon.
Great to have you, Rob. People are dialing in, so we're going to go a little bit slow here in the beginning as people the Substack platform takes a couple minutes for people to get online. But, we're here today to talk about your compelling new article in the Washington Monthly, which is sort of a warning shot out there about the dangers of Trump's economic agenda. And you've been on before. I'm grateful for your appearances here in the Hopium community. Can you just summarize, give us a quick summary, or not a quick summary, a good summary of your piece today? Because it's coming at a very opportune time. We are entering into now budget season where the Republicans are going to have to lock in all the things that they have passed and tried to do this year. We've entered now this sort of tariff madness period where the tariffs all over the world are going to increase in a week. And so we're actually having a very big economic conversation right now in the country, even though a lot of the political press is talking about Epstein. Behind this is a really important economic conversation. And I wonder if you could just share the key findings of your piece.
Sure. First of all, it's a pleasure to be talking to your community. You're doing a great job, Simon.
Having a lot of fun. We've got a great crew here.
What I looked at was the impact of the deficit. Deficit hawks have been saying for 20 years that the deficit was really going to harm the economy. And it has felt like they were crying wolf. Well, for once, the deficit hawks are right. And the reason they're right this time, it's just about how big the number is. CBO tells us that based on the one big ugly bill, our deficit next year will be 7% of GDP and will continue at that level at least for the next 5 years. Now, you have to fund deficits out of savings. You can't fund them out of consumption, right? And all income is either consumed or it's saved. And total savings by Americans, and this is not only personal savings by households, but also business savings through retained earnings. Right now, total private savings comes to 7.7% of GDP. Under these numbers, 90% of everything American businesses and consumers save would have to go into Treasury securities in order to fund the deficit, which is to say it will push up interest rates. Now, the truth is we don't depend only on U.S. savings. We depend on the kindness of strangers. That is, we depend on foreign savings by foreign governments and savings by foreign investors, because they're also investing in Treasury securities. They own 1/3 of the federal debt today. They own 30% of all corporate bonds, corporate lending through the market, and they own 27% of all U.S. stocks. That's how much our entire financial system and consequently the stability of the American economy depends on foreign savings. Well, there are two issues here. One is we're going to have to borrow a lot more from foreign governments and investors than we ever had before. Keep in mind, the U.S. budget deficit averaged about 2% in the 1990s. It averaged 1.5% of GDP from 2000 to 2007. It averaged 3.6% of GDP from 2012 to 2019. That is after the financial crisis until the next crisis, the pandemic crisis. So we are now looking at a double of the share of GDP that deficits represented before the pandemic, and an increase of 4.5 times what it was the first decade, the first years of the 21st century, and 3.5 times what it was in the 1990s. What's changed is the dimensions of this compared to U.S. savings. Now, this means that in order to attract that much foreign capital and domestic capital, we have to raise interest rates. And don't forget that if 90% of U.S. savings go into Treasury securities, that doesn't leave very much for business investment, car loans, mortgages, credit card loans. The entire economy runs on credit. We are inevitably pushing up interest rates. The danger is that the countries we depend on to keep our financial system and the entire economy stable are the same countries that Trump is threatening with punishing tariffs. And the question is, the economy is going to slow significantly because of this, because interest rates will go up regardless of what the Federal Reserve does. Federal Reserve only controls very short-term credit directly. Overnight loans between banks, that's the federal funds rate, or 3-month Treasury bills. All the rest are set by the markets, and that depends on supply and demand. So all those rates are going to go up regardless of what the Fed does. Trump clearly doesn't understand how the Fed works and how they affect interest rates. But if we have a major lender, Japan, China, the EU, Middle Eastern governments, decide that
Hey, Rob, can I just jump in one thing? Is that when you touch the desk, your camera's bouncing a little bit. So
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Just be careful about that. Anyway, I know you're all fired up. I didn't want to stop you. You were on a roll, right? So I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's bouncing around.
I will not. I will not do that anymore. Is all you need is one major country calling Trump's bluff and saying, okay, if you continue to say you're going to impose 15 to 25% tariffs on our exports to you, then we're going to buy less U.S. Treasury bills and U.S. Treasury bonds. We're going to buy less U.S. stocks. We're going to buy less U.S. corporate paper. And if they do this suddenly, that kind of shock breaks down the economy. We could be looking at the kind of shock that we saw in 2008. The third financial crisis in 18 years. And now it may be that we'll skate through. And the only thing that we'll have to deal with is higher interest rates that slow the economy. Economy's up, contracted in the first quarter. It didn't grow. It shrank by at a rate of 0.5%. So, you slow the economy and you're either in a recession or you're in such slow growth that unemployment goes up and incomes go down.
Well, and Rob, there are two other dimensions to this, right? As you described, is that it creates this vulnerability and fragility. And if things are to go awry, if for whatever reason, the shock or the shock of the tariffs or some other global event, and the economy really slows, then what happens is, of course, is that the government has to spend more money to pay for social insurance programs and the programs, the countercyclicals as they're called, and less revenue come in. So the deficit actually gets worse and worse, while
Right.
interest rates are also, not coming down because of the other dynamics. And so the possibility of a shock happening that then creates a far greater threat to our fiscal integrity is, high. It's not a remote kind of pie in the sky thing. There's a reasonable chance something like that could happen given the volatility of Trump's presidency and sort of the general frustration with him around the world, and or hatred, maybe even a better word. And now, on top of everything you just described, we've learned today, just in the last few hours, that the president's strategy, on August 1st, next Friday, the president has promised to double or triple all the tariffs with all of our major trading partners in the world, after already the tariffs having slowed the economy down and raised, caused inflation to reignite. Dangerous economic strategy. And what we're learning is that his deals that he's cutting isn't to lower tariffs, but it's actually to increase them. And the first one he negotiated, and we still haven't seen the text of the deal with Japan, looks to be like tariffs will go from 10% to 15%. We see the EU is negotiating something similar. How is your initial thinking about what that's going to do to your map that you laid out in your piece about, the idea being that, he's charting this course for us, and there's a very large iceberg over here, and it's not clear that he's steering away from it. It looks like he's steering towards it, which is a little bit concerning to all of
He
us.
doesn't
Right?
see it.
Or he doesn't see it. He doesn't see it. Thank you. That's a better. So add the new notion that we're going to now see a 50% increase, it looks like, in the tariffs that have already raised prices and slowed the economy and helped contribute to higher interest rates, right? What happens now?
I actually think the increase is a lot more than that. Our average tariff rate was about 2%. Our tariff rate with the EU was 1%, our average weighted tariff rate. If 1% goes to 15%, that's not a 50% increase, it's a 15 times increase. And if we go from 2% or 3% globally to 15% globally, and I think it'll be above 15% because there are all these things like autos in which he says the rates are going to be higher. You've got, a 500% increase in tariffs. Now, it is true we're increasing from a very low base. But I tried to do a little back of the envelope analysis right before we came on of the impact on consumers. That's based on what percentage of U.S. What percentage of all consumption and business inputs are imported, and how much do tariffs raise prices? The Atlanta Fed just did a survey, and their survey businesses expect to pass on 50% of their additional tariff costs in higher prices. And then I did a computation based on raising the tariff rate globally from 2 to 3% to 15%. And what we found, total consumption is about $19 trillion. And we're adding $434 billion in costs after you take the 50%. And that means that represents 2.3% of consumption. What does that tell you? It tells you that the current inflation rate of 2.7 would go to 5%. It'll happen gradually over a period of about a year or less. So that itself won't be a big shock, but it will depress the economy because people will have less money to spend on all their consumption because some parts of it are costing a lot more. And so the economy slows, and it slows just at the time when the deficit is, technically out of control, not rhetorically, technically out of control. And the deficit will go up as a percentage of GDP because GDP is going down.
Right.
So we are boxed in unless Republicans sharply change course. And the only way they could do that would be to roll back their tax cuts. And they're not going to do that.
And the tariffs.
And the tariffs.
I mean, the thing that's so interesting about all this, right, is that, Trump, I think the thing that, you and I, the last time we got together, and because we've all been trying to understand what he's doing, right? And as I wrote about today in Hopium, there is a madness in all of this, right? There is this idea that he invents realities in his own head, and then he has this superhuman capacity to stay there even when reality is telling him otherwise, right? And what's happened here is that the tariffs are the single most unpopular thing that he's done. And in the latest poll by the G. Elliott Morris and Strength in Numbers, he's at 33% approval, 61 disapproval on inflation and prices. And it's the thing that's been driving his poll numbers down. And he's obsessed now. He's now starting to talk all the time that he's actually polling, he claims, at the highest level ever. When he's actually polling, he's dropped at least 20 points and his numbers are cratering. He is taking actions that will almost certainly further drive down his poll numbers. It will be rejected by the American people. It will be a backlash. And I think I just have 2 points I want to make about this. One is that we speculated the last time you were on that one of the reasons he was doing this was to move the tax burden of the United States from wealthy people to working and middle class people. Right. And it certainly seems like that is the actual goal because he's aware the deficit's a problem. They've decided that they're getting lots of revenues from the tariffs. So they're just going to get more revenues from the tariffs, right? He believes, and perhaps in his own craziness, that it will lower interest rates because the deficit's getting smaller, right? I mean, I'm just being generous, perhaps, that this is actually the thought process, right? But it's an explanation. But what he's doing is the exact opposite of everything that he's campaigned on. He told us he was going to lower prices, make working people the center of his world, right? He was going to attack the elites. And he's now doing an unconstitutional, illegal, unsanctioned, massive tax increase, literally taxation without representation, that disproportionately hurts working people and middle-class people. The exact opposite thing that he said he was going to do when he campaigned. And I think the idea that, when he talks about McKinley in the 19th century, when the country was wealthier than any other period, which of course is completely insane, but that they didn't, we got all our revenue through tariffs and not through the income tax. He really is attempting to sort of get rid of the income tax and the progressive income tax and replace it with, in essence, a consumption tax, right? With a tariff that is wildly regressive for his own voters. Anyway, it's just mind-boggling.
One very interesting fact I came across about 8 or 9 months ago. Do you know what the estimated poverty rate was in the United States under McKinley?
Tell me.
70%. 70%. It was 60% into the 1920s.
Right. And the biggest poverty reduction that we've ever done was, Social Security and then Medicare, right? Were these things that dramatically reduced poverty, right, in America. And then
the enormous growth that we experienced while unilaterally cutting tariffs in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s. And then negotiating under the gap.
And I think just Rob, just to talk to our audience, is that Rob and I have been collaborating on economic issues for 33 years. Rob was the architect of Clinton's economic strategy, which, we saw 4% GDP growth over 8 years. We went from deficits to surpluses. We had huge increases in the median income in the United States. Most successful economic presidency in recent decades, even more so than Biden, right? And so we've been having these conversations, and I think that for those of us who are schooled in this stuff, and Rob is much more schooled than I am, there is this kind of madness that we're witnessing, right? Like there is this, Trump is sort of defying, he is saying things that are not true about things that are happening. He's claimed that inflation is under control, that his budget doesn't cut Medicaid, that the tax cuts will pay for themselves, the deficits are not going to go up, right? He's saying things that are delusional. And to your point, we are now in a place where this kind of guy who is in political and physical decline, whose public performances over the last 10 days have been the most wild and unhinged of his presidency, is now making, big decisions about our economic future and the future of our kids and our grandkids that look kind of batshit crazy. And it is alarming about what's happening here. And your piece raises one of the pieces of the alarm. I mean, you're raising, we now have multiple ways that we're raising the alarm about where we're headed here.
Yes, one of the ironies here is that under Biden, some people, the deficits don't matter people, came up with what has been called modern monetary theory. It's not a theory. It's a set of baseless claims. That's what economists believe. The basic principle was deficits never matter because the Fed can always print money to cover them. Well, that's what MAGA has now adopted. They've now adopted the same view. And it wasn't true under Biden. But we kind of skated through because deficits do matter when the economy is depressed. And then you want deficits to be larger in order to stimulate consumption and investment to get back to a normal place. But they've now adopted it for huge deficits in an economy that has not been depressed,
right?
Until he came along. It's Trump and his courtiers believe they can spin their way out of anything. But you can't spin the economy itself. Markets are impervious to spin. And people, he spins most successfully when he's trying to get people to believe that what he's going to do will help them. And he's been very successful at that. But when it actually happens, he can't spin his way out of the fact that inflation is rising and people feel more squeezed.
Well, and he's the thing is that he's sort of, what I wrote about yesterday at Hopium was, it is astonishing that they've essentially lost every major argument of his presidency he's losing right now on immigration, on inflation, on the economy, on healthcare, on the big ugly bill. All these things have gone deeply negative. And, this idea that he had this kind of superpower and this capacity to sort of bring everybody along, it's no longer the case. I mean, the thrill is gone. He's, his fastball's 80 miles an hour, like whatever it is we want to say. He's in material decline as a politician right now, physically, popularity wise. I think also even the fact that we saw this week that the House rebelled on him on the Epstein stuff, that was pretty dramatic stuff that just happened, right? Where his own party spit the bit and wanted to vote with the Democrats to release the Epstein files. And so he's a weakened, diminished figure doing remarkably dangerous things. And I think that, anyway, Rob, I could talk to you all day. We got to go, but I want to just, before we go, tell everybody where they can find the piece, and where, if they want to read deeper into your analysis about one piece of this, which is what's happening with the deficit and our fiscal integrity.
They can go to WashingtonMonthly.com. It's on the homepage. And if they go later, when it moves off the homepage, the first day it took up half the homepage, and now it's a little piece of the homepage because that's the way news runs. You can also, I've written, 25 pieces on the economy and economic policy for Washington Monthly over the last 3 to 4 years. They're all there, including some on tariffs. I always encourage everyone to try to educate themselves as much as they can about the issues that are going to shape their lives. And, one of the critical issues is the economy and prices.
Well, and just to end up, Rob, I mean, what's important about all this, because people are thinking, what do we do, right? What do we do about this? I mean, we're heading towards the iceberg and the captain doesn't even know it's there, to use your analogy. And what I just want to say to everybody is, one is that at Hopium, and Rob's writings and our interviews are also on the Hopium site, is number one is that, call your congressmen and your senators and demand that they remove the tariffs. The tariffs are, in my mind, the greatest abuse of power by a president in American history. These tariffs are illegal and unconstitutional. He doesn't have the legal authority to be executing the tariffs. The two cases that have gone in front of judges on the legality of the tariffs have both found them to be illegal, by the way, including by the court that oversees trade issues in the United States. And so it's also, in addition to being reckless and dangerous and a massive tax increase on middle-class people and a betrayal, they're also illegal and unconstitutional in him acting as a despot in ways that are deeply uncharacteristic, based on our founding fathers' experience with taxation without representation, with the punishing tariffs from Mad King George. There is no possibility of the design of our democracy that unilateral tariff authority would ever be put into the executive, given the experience of our own founding. And so this is also just an unbelievable fuck you to the entire American project, going back to the way that we were founded in the 1800s, in the 18th century. But importantly, the next thing, we're about to have a big debate about all of this because they have to pass a budget. And in that budget are going to be these tariffs, right? In that budget are going to be these yawning deficits. In that budget are going to be the NIH cuts and the cuts to FEMA and the cuts to NASA. And in that budget is going to be the ACA subsidy reductions and the getting rid of the clean energy subsidies, right? All of this stuff that they did in the big ugly, and all the other things that they've done outside of the big ugly legislative bill, are now going to have to be put into an actual budget that they have to pass. And so we're going to have months of the ability to have this conversation with the American people. And Trump and the Republicans are starting in a very deep hole already. In the polls that I showed this week, there were two questions. One is, do you believe the big ugly bill will be beneficial for you and your family, 27%. The other question was, do you believe that Trump's policies have been beneficial to you and your family? 25%. That means that half of the people that voted for Trump do not believe that his policies are benefiting them. They are in a very weakened state. And this is why I think for all of you, we got to have our summer and people got to take time off in August. It's going to be slow, we hope, even though he's out making noise every day. But we got to come back here in the fall ready to go to have the biggest policy fight that we've ever had. We got to be fully engaged with Congress to make the Republicans eat this wildly destructive and reckless agenda that they foisted upon all of us. We're going to have another bite at the apple. This last argument over the big ugly, we won that argument, right? We actually got that thing into a negative place. So we've got another opportunity to have this big debate. And I hope the Hopium community, with Rob's help and all of your help, are leaders in taking and understanding what they've done to us and prosecuting a major debate about it in the coming months.
And keep it, I keep on reminding myself when I read these polls that this is the state of disapproval before the direct effects of the policies hit people.
Yep.
This is simply based on their understanding of what's going to happen, not the experience of it happening, which is more powerful. I also want to mention the other place to read this essay and all my essays is at my website, sonecon.com, sonecon.com. Just click on results, the tab that says results, and you'll get all of them.
Okay, brother. Thank you so much for being here today. Thanks for your continued good work. Thanks for your helping us understand complicated stuff in a time of national challenge. And everybody, we got to fight really hard. This is, as I often say at Hopium, why are we all here together? Because we want to reclaim the future of our kids and our grandkids that is being stolen from them now by Trump and his team.
And thank you, Simon, for your patriotism.
Okay, Rob. See you, everybody. Take care.